Today we're going to learn how to make a navigation inside a Bootstrap website. Meaning that right now, as you guys can see, we have no navigation inside this website here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys different ways you can create navigations using Bootstrap. Now, Bootstrap navigations are very similar to other Bootstrap concepts. Meaning that right now, if we were to create, grid systems or images, we use classes in order to change up how this should actually look like. So right now, because we want to create a navigation, we also use classes in order to change the layout or the look of it inside Bootstrap. So inside my code here, inside my index file, I'm going to go ahead and go on top of the div tag that we created containing the class called container fluid. So the container for the navigation is not going to be inside the container fluid class that all the content of the website is inside of. We're actually going to take that and put it outside this container. So inside my body tag, right on top of our container fluid class, we're going to go ahead and insert a nav tag, which is just a regular HTML5 nav tag that we have inside HTML5. Now inside this nav tag, we're going to go ahead and include some code. But before we do that, we need to include the necessary classes inside the tag. So we're going to say class, and set it equal to Navbar. And we need to tell it which type of navbar we want to have inside our website. Now we have two types. We have the default one, and then we have one called inverse. And all this does is that it changes the color of the actual navigation. Now, if you're the type of person who says, well, I don't like any of the colors that Bootstrap offers me inside the website, don't worry. You can actually go into the styling of the actual website and change the color yourself. So I'm just going to go and stick with the default one called navbar-default. Like so. If I were to save it and refresh my browser, you guys can see we now get this default navigation bar up on top of the website that's just gray. Now, if I were to say navbar inverse, just to show you guys, it changes the color to black. A couple of things you guys will also notice is that we do actually have a default border radius around the navbar. So if you guys want to style anything regarding this specific style you guys see here, then you need to go in and style the actual class called navbar. Okay, so let's actually go and change this back to default, which has a grayish color and a border, which I personally don't really like, but we can always change that later. I'm going to go ahead and go inside this nav tag. And inside the nav tag, we're going to go ahead and add another container fluid like we did down with the content. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy it here and paste it inside the actual nav tag and close it again. So now that we have this, we can actually go ahead and include all the content for the actual navigation. So I'm going to go inside our div tag called container fluid, and I can start including a logo or the navigation if I want to inside these tags. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and add is a logo. Now the way we do that is not by just creating some kind of image file or something like that. We need to do it the Bootstrap way, meaning that I'm going to go ahead and create a div tag that I'm going to go ahead and call navbar header, like so, meaning that this is going to be the header of the website. Now, of course, if you guys want to, you can always change the tag so it doesn't have a name as div. You can actually call this one header if you want to. It's all up to you. Just make sure you include the proper classes inside these tags, so we do actually know how the layout is going to be like. So inside this navbar header, I'm just going to go ahead and move it down a bit. I'm going to go ahead and include an anchor, because I want to have some kind of logo that links to the front page or something. So I'm going to say the hyperreference should be index.html. And I'm going to go ahead and include some text in here. We could insert an image if we wanted to. I'm just going to include text because it's easier for now. So I'm going to call this one mmtuts, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now this anchor tag is also going to have a class because we need to make sure we have the proper classes when it comes to Bootstrap. So because I'm using a logo, we use something called a Navbar brand, meaning that we're branding the website with some kind of text or an image. So I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to call it navbar-brand, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh the browser. And what you guys will see is we do actually get this default styling for the text or the image that we insert inside the navbar. Again, if you guys want to change that, because right now it doesn't look very pretty, we can go into the styling of the website that we created ourselves over here and just change the actual text layout. So after we have the brand, I'm going to go ahead and include the actual unordered list, which is going to be the navigation. So I'm going to go ahead and say we have a UL tag, which is unordered list. I'm going to say we have a list item inside this unordered list. So now we have the basics of a navigation. Now inside the UL tag, we need to include another class. Again, Bootstrap likes classes, so we need to make sure we add the proper classes in order to get this working properly. So inside the class, we're going to say we have a nav, space, and then we want to say we have a navbar dash nav, which then adds the proper stylings in order to get this navbar working properly. So now that we have this, we can actually go inside our list item and start writing the anchor tag that needs to wrap around the actual link, and then the text that needs to go inside the actual list item. So we can say we have a anchor tag like so, and inside the anchor tag, we have a piece of text. So we can say this one is called home. And then inside the hyperreference, we can go ahead and just link to the index page, just to have some kind of link like so. Now, one thing we can actually go ahead and add, which is optional, is we can go ahead and say, well, when I enter this website, I want it to tell me inside the navigation by highlighting the actual navigation of the page I'm inside of, to show the user which page we're actually inside right now. So what we can do is inside the list item, let's actually go ahead and copy it down a couple more times so we have more than just a home page. I'm going to call this one sample. I'm going to call the next one contact, just to have something. Now what I can do, like I said, is I can go inside my list item of the first one, because when I enter the website the first time, I'm going to be inside my home page. So I'm going to go inside the list item of the home page and add a class called active. Now, if I do this, as you guys may notice when I refresh the browser, we get this little square going around the link that says right now we're inside the home page. Now, just to show you guys, if I were to actually, resize the actual browser, you guys can see we do actually get it responsive, which is what we want inside a website, when we do actually use Bootstrap, because this is why Bootstrap is so awesome when it comes to layouts. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is how to make a drop-down inside our navigation. So if we want to have sub-pages, we can actually have that inside the website. So when we want to create a drop-down, we need to go ahead and change, again, the classes of the list items we have inside our website. If we were to just shift this out a bit so we can actually see the code in here. If I were to say, well, the sample page is going to have a drop-down menu, I can actually go ahead, go inside my list item, add a class, and call this one Dropdown. And this is an actual class inside Bootstrap that tells it that we need to add the styling for a dropdown. So inside the dropdown list item, we're going to go ahead and move down the anchor tag to the next line. We're going to go ahead and move down the closing list item, so we have some kind of hierarchy that looks nice. After we do this, we need to change the anchor tag inside the list item, because right now we need to style it, and we need to tell it using the JavaScript that we included inside our links up here, that we want to create some kind of toggle function. So when we click the sample menu, it opens up all the sub menus. So inside the anchor tag of the actual drop-down item, I'm going to go ahead and include a class. Like so. And I'm going to go ahead and call this one drop-down toggle. Like so. Now, after we included the actual class, we need to include another attribute inside the anchor, because we need to tell the JavaScript that it needs to open up the actual navigation when we click this button here. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one data-toggle equal to, and I'm going to go ahead and set this one equal to drop-down, like so. Now, the last thing we need to add inside the anchor tag is we need to add the actual icon that tells the user inside the website that this is a drop-down menu. You can actually click this, and it's going to have more menus underneath it. So inside our anchor tag, right before we get the actual text of the anchor tag, which is called sample here, I'm going to go ahead and include a span tag, like so. I'm going to go ahead and give this span tag a class called caret, which goes in and gives us the icon that we want to include inside this menu. So if I were to refresh the browser, you guys can see we get this little arrow here that says this is a drop-down. Now, if you guys want to add some spacing, you can also do that by just creating a regular HTML spacing in here. So we can say ampersand NBSP, and then we can refresh the browser. And as you guys can see, we now get this little spacing in here. So now it actually looks kind of nice. So the next thing we need to add is the actual drop-down menus. So inside the list item here, before we go outside the list item, we want to include another unordered list. Now, this unordered list is going to have a class, and we're going to set this class to dropdown-menu, like so. Inside the unordered list, we're going to go ahead and add a list item. And this list item is just going to be a regular list item like we would in any kind of website. So we're going to say we have an anchor tag inside this list item. We're going to just reference to hashtag, which means that we don't actually go anywhere, we just stay inside the page. And I'm just going to go ahead and create a text called list1, just to have something. And now what we can do is we can actually go ahead and copy this, paste it underneath there a couple of times, change it from list 1 to 2 and 3. If I were to refresh the website, you guys can see that when I click this icon, nothing actually happens yet. And the reason for that is that we did actually change our hyperreference inside the actual menu that we see here to go to index.html. So we need to change this one to hashtag, just like we did underneath here, because we don't want this navigation to take us anywhere when we do actually click it. So now we created the necessary code in order to get the navigation to work. I went ahead and resized the browser so we can actually see this inside a website environment. So if I were to go up to my Dropdown and click it, you guys can see we actually get the navigation working. Now, if I were to resize the browser back down to a tablet, you guys can see that it also works inside tablets. So this is a really nice way to get navigation to work without having to put a lot of code into it other than what Bootstrap actually gives you inside Bootstrap. So this is how we can create a navigation. Now, some of you guys might be asking me, Daniel, okay, we just learned how to create this navigation that has, a navigation in it with a drop down. But what if I want the navigation to be in the right side of the browser instead of on the left side right next to the logo? Well, if we go back inside our code, we can actually go inside our unordered list, the one right here, and add another class called Navbar right. So I'm going to say navbar dash right. If I then refresh the browser, you guys will notice that when I change the layout to desktop mode, the navigation is going to be on the right side, like so. And it works again just like before. Now what we can also use this for is, let's say I have Facebook and I want to have a Facebook link in the right side of the browser and then a navigation on the left side. I can actually go inside the code and then delete the navbar right we just included. And underneath the unordered list, I'm going to go ahead and create a second unordered list. Now inside this unordered list, I'm going to give it the exact same classes as we did with the previous one, meaning that we're going to have the nav and navbar nav inside the class, like so. But I'm also going to go ahead and add navbar right, like so. Now inside this unordered list, I'm going to go ahead and add just one more list item and another anchor tag. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and say, well, we need to link to somewhere. I'm just going to go ahead and say we link to a hashtag, which means we stay on the page when we click the link. Of course, if you guys have a Facebook link that goes to your Facebook profile, you can go ahead and include that instead of hashtag. I'm just going to go ahead and say hashtag for now. So inside this anchor tag, I'm going to go ahead and include a span tag, like so. I'm going to go ahead and give it a class, which is going to be equal to glyph icon, like so. And then we need to decide what kind of icon we want to have inside this navigation link. Again, you don't have to include this span tag. I'm just doing it because if I want to link to Facebook, there might be a really nice icon we can use in order to represent Facebook. So if I go back inside my browser, you guys can see I do actually have a link open here called getbootstrap.com, which is where we did actually get all the links for Bootstrap. And we can then say /components. And then we come into this list here that has glyph icons in it. So I can actually go ahead and choose one that might link to Facebook or do something else. So I'm just going to go ahead and find one I think looks really nice here. Okay, so I did actually choose an icon with a shopping cart in it. So in case the user has to go to your website to buy stuff, then we can have a shopping cart up in the top right corner. So what I'm going to do here inside Bootstrap's website is I'm going to go ahead and copy the text that's right underneath the actual icon that I chose. I'm going to copy it. And then I'm going to go inside my class and paste in the glyph icon class that we got from the website. If I save it now and then add a bit of text inside the anchor tag, because we don't actually have text yet. Again, you don't need to have text, but I'm just going to go ahead and say cart. I'm going to go into my website, refresh, and as you guys can see, we now get a cart with the word cart. So this is how we can actually create navigation bars on the left and the right side of the browser. Now the next thing we could add to the navigation could be a search field. So let's say I want to have a search field right next to the contact button up here. I can actually go back to the code and add a search field. So if you go back inside the code, I can say, well, I want to have a search field right next to the main navigation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go in between the first unordered list and the second unordered list. And we're going to go ahead and add a form tag. So we're going to say form, enter, and then inside the form tags, we're going to go ahead and create a div box. Now the div box is going to have all the different elements from the form inside of it except the button. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and go inside the div box, and I'm going to go ahead and include an input. And the input is going to have a type. We're just going to call this one text because it makes sense. And we're going to go ahead and give it some kind of name. Just for the sake of it, we're going to call this one search. And the next thing is going to be a placeholder. Now the placeholder could be anything you guys wanted to have inside of the actual input. I'm just going to call this one for search as well. So now that we have the bare minimum for the search form, we need to include the proper classes because remember, this is Bootstrap, we need to have classes in it. So inside the form tag, I'm going to go ahead and include a class. Now the class, at least the first one here, is going to be the Navbar form. Like so. Let's actually make sure we spell that correctly. Navbar form, like so. And the second one is going to be which position we want the navbar to be in. So do we want it to have it in the left side of navigation or the right side? We're going to go ahead and set this one to the left side. So I'm going to say navbar dash left. So what we get now is a very basic form inside the navigation. What we also need to include is a class inside the div tag down here. So I'm going to go ahead and say class, and it's going to be called form dash group, like so. And then inside the input tag, we also need to add a class. So we're going to say class equal to double quotes, and the class name is going to be called form control. So I'm going to say form dash control, like so. And then before we can finish this one off, we need to have a button. So underneath the actual div group or the form group that we have inside the div tag, we're going to go ahead and include a button, like so. Now the button is going to have some kind of text in it. I'm just going to call this one search, like so. And inside the button tag, we're going to go ahead and include a type. We're going to set this one to submit, space, and then we're going to go ahead and set a class. And this one is going to be called btn for button. This is just a standard button class inside Bootstrap. And then the next thing is going to be what style of button we want. So we're just going to call this one the button default, just to have some kind of button. I'm going to go into my navigation, and I'm just going to refresh. And as you guys can see, we now have a search field. We can type something and we can search. Of course, right now, we don't actually have anything inside our website that actually handles the search bar. But if you want to have that using PHP, then we can include this search field. So the next thing we need to add inside the navigation is a way for the navigation to stay on top of the website when we do actually want to scroll down into the content. So if we were to say we want to scroll down, of course right now the navigation doesn't stick to the top of the website. Now the way we fix that is by going up to the main nav tag we have inside the code, and we add another class to it. So inside the class, we're going to go ahead and say we want to have navbar dash fixed dash top, save it, refresh, and as you guys can see when I scroll, it becomes stuck to the top of the website, which is what we want to have. And this is something that, at least personally, I use a lot. So this is something that's really important to have inside a Bootstrap website. If you guys want to have it fixed to the bottom, we can also go ahead and change that. So we can say instead of top, we can say bottom. If I refresh, you guys can see now it gets stuck at the bottom of the website. So the last thing we need to have before we close off this episode is how to make a collapsing menu. So right now, as you guys can see, when I do actually resize the browser into what's called tablet or cell phone view, the navigation looks like this, which is not really what we want to have inside the website. And I'm just going to change this back to top because it looks a lot better. This is not what we want to have inside the tablet. We don't want to have the navigation as these bars on top of the website. We want to have this little icon up in the top that says click me or something. Then we click it, and then we can open up the menu. So the way we can do that is by going inside our header, which right now is called Navbar header, which is inside a div tag. Inside this div tag, we just have the brand name of the actual website. So right now we have mmtuts inside the header here. So if I want to create this drop down or this open close menu, I can go inside the header here. And right before we actually add the anchor tag for the nav brand, I can go ahead and add a button. So we're going to go ahead and say button, open it up. And inside this button, we're going to go ahead and include some different types, some classes, and some JavaScript functions. So we're going to say, first of all, space. We're going to set a type, as button. The next attribute is going to be class. It's going to be set to Navbar toggle, like so. And the next thing is going to be an attribute called data toggle, which again is JavaScript, at least for the JavaScript to know what to actually do in here. This should be data, not zeta, like so. Set it equal to collapse, like so. So now that we have this, we need to include one more attribute inside the button, which is going to be called data target. I'm going to set this equal to double quotes, and it's going to be called hashtag my navbar. And navbar has to be with a big N. So we're going to say navbar, like so. So now that we create the actual button, we need to include what needs to go inside the button. Now we could add some text to it if we want to. We could also add some, an actual icon of some sort. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and include a span that has a icon inside the span tag. So we're going to set a class. We're going to set it to icon bar, like so, which adds one line of bar inside the actual button. So because we want to have this typical, 3-line navigation that collapses or opens, we're going to go ahead and include 2 more. So now when I save it and refresh the browser, you guys can see now we have these 3 lines and we have a button. If I click it, nothing happens because we need to tell it what it needs to close and open. So in order to do this, we need to wrap the entire navigation around a div box, which activates or deactivates when we do actually click this button up here. So in order to do this, I'm going to go right on top of the unordered list that has the entire navigation in it, at least the one we want to have as a dropdown, which should be, I think, pretty much everything. So we're going to go ahead and include a div box on top of the first navigation. I'm just going to go ahead and close the div box right underneath my navigation down here at the bottom, after the shopping cart, because I want everything to open up when I do actually click this button here. Again, if you guys want the shopping cart to always be available, and just the main navigation to open and close, you can go ahead and close the div tag before the actual shopping cart or before the search bar if you just want the main navigation to open and close. So having done this, let's actually go up to the opening div tag and add the necessary classes and IDs that it needs in order to actually get activated by the button we created. So inside the div tag, we're going to go ahead and say class, and we're going to go ahead and set the class to collapse. Space, we're going to add a second class called Navbar collapse dash collapse, like so. Then afterwards, we're going to go ahead and add an ID, and we're going to call this one my navbar. And again, because we're referencing to a my navbar with a big N, we're going to go ahead and make sure that my navbar has a big N as well. So now that I've saved this, refresh the browser, you guys will notice that the menu has been closed. There's no menu in here. Once I click the button, it opens up. And again, we can toggle this by keep clicking it. So this is how we can create a really awesome navbar inside Bootstrap. Again, remember, if you guys don't like the actual styling of this navigation, you can go ahead and change it inside the styling of the actual style sheet that we attach to the actual document, and just do your own styling to it. One thing I want to add before we close off is when I do actually resize the browser, you guys will notice that when we get into desktop mode, the drop-down actually disappears because we can actually, see the entire navigation. But once I get far enough that it doesn't become available to us, we can do the open and closing with the navigation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys next time.